Hey everybody, I'm Nico.
And I'm TK.
And that makes this X is for Podcast, your one and only show where we talk about comics on Wednesdays.
That's what we do.
And it's the only show where they do that. So
yeah, there's no other ones.
Not even one. So super exciting, super excited to be here, really excited to talk comics with everybody.
Listen, I'm going to tell you this. There's definitely no show where they say we're taking 2 books from DC and taking 2 books from Marvel, and that's what we're discussing this week. And then they end up discussing like 7 to 10 books in total.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely put a lot of rules on it.
Yeah.
And then don't
we don't follow. And listen, I don't think any other show has our unique brand of off the cuff like that. So I think we're doing pretty great.
I agree. So it's a Wednesday. Yesterday saw the premiere of Daredevil Born Again episodes 1 and 2. Today saw the release of some books. It's a really interesting cycle, I think, for comics right now, because we're in a place where, yes, Absolute's got a lot of really good vibes. People are really pro Absolute right now. And I feel like they started as pro Ultimate as they are pro Absolute right now, but they're not that pro Ultimate anymore at all.
I mean, I feel like the pinnacle of alternate parallel universes that could be a thing was the start of Ultimate Spider-Man, because it was one of the greats working on one of the greats, kind of working the storyline or like the general setup of a storyline that I think meets the modern time. Again, it's the thing that I keep saying, which is it is the wrong instinct to say Spider-Man can't grow up because comic fans don't like adult Peter Parker. Comic fans run the gamut from now 80-year-olds to 5-year-olds, and the 5-year-olds would like to see a teen Spider-Man, but the 40-year-olds would like to see a more adult Spider-Man, and we don't have anybody like that, so it should be Peter Parker. So anyway, that's happening in Ultimates, and that's great. And then, you get some more really big highlights, like Peach Momoko is writing and drawing an entire X-Men book, and it looks really cool. But then it's maybe a smidge inscrutable, and it kind of, how does it fit into the rest of the universe? ? Black Panther, really great to see a black character getting one of the flagship books in a very small line. Storm's in the mix. Oh wait, Storm's in the mix is kind of weird. We maybe actually should not have Storm in the mix, and Storm deserves Ultimate Storm. So it just like we slowly start to chip away at all the things that make it great, and Ultimate Spider-Man still seems like a really cool setup, but now it seems so diluted by a lack of excellence all around, and sort of a hedging of bets in terms of like this isn't going to be like a new imprint or a whole new universe that even comes close to being as important as the main Marvel universe, but here it is. Then we get Absolute, in which everything is firing on all cylinders right from the get-go. The 3 books that start off are really great. The alternate realities they present are really interesting, really cool, well written, great authors on them, great art. But as the exercise has continued, and as we keep hearing that it's going to be expanded, for one thing, guys, I know Kid Flash is coming, or Absolute Flash is coming out. I don't need it in the back of every book. I don't need 20 announcements weeks in advance. I think it's a lot, and it's sort of it's overexposing me to the first 6 pages before I've had a chance to read the book at all. And now I'm getting a little sick of seeing it, and the book isn't even out yet. So there's a lot of stuff happening there where, like, yeah, it's just not the really hard force of that first punch when it's announced and it all starts up does not then subsequently lead to something that feels like it's meeting the rest of that energy in a sustainable way.
And I feel like one of the realities of not having a home run on any front right now is that when you're talking about a universe that only sustains 4 titles, 3 titles right now, it can't be your home run franchise. Your home run franchise has to really be a few more titles. It really needs to be all-encompassing. And one of the things you're always looking at with Ultimate and Absolute is that they're always reflections of things that are going or have gone on in the universes that they're reflective of, which is also kind of the truth for the MCU at all times. So, we're looking at a place where the original versions of the stories don't matter so much right now. It's really the reflections of the stories. We're sort of living in an era where nobody is that concerned with Romeo and Juliet, and everybody's really thinking about West Side Story. It's kind of almost like nobody cares about the Honeymooners and everybody cares about the Flintstones. And like we're seeing a lot of that in the currents of Absolute, and even in Uncanny and the stuff we're going to talk about with X-Men, where we're seeing iterative ideas that we've already seen, but we're seeing new takes on them, because a lot of what we're going to talk about today does actually feel familiar, even when it's not iterative.
Yeah, I hear that.
Have you had a chance to check out Born Again? I mean, obviously we didn't say Born Again spoilers, so we're not going to dive in.
Easy. I watched the first episode. I did not watch the second one because I like to start new shows with my partner Jake, and we didn't have time for both. But yeah, I watched the first episode. So very pleasantly surprised.
Oh, I'm really glad. I don't really find myself a reasonable benchmark. The things I like, I'm gonna like. The things I'm not gonna like, I'm not gonna like. And it's really funny. I feel like I get people were, because like all night people were messaging me as it was I was so glad I decided to watch it at 9:00, because I think I got like 40 messages between.
Yeah, that was specifically why I didn't say a word to you about it, because I was like, everybody's gonna be blowing up Nico because he's the Daredevil guy.
Oh, I was having like little group chats. I was having the time of my life. But like one of the things that everybody kept saying to me is, how does this compare to the comics? How does this compare to the comics? And I was like, I really wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
But like it felt really cool being like a Daredevil guru, and it was so interesting having so many people be like, well, what'd you think? How are your feelings on, like, I don't know. It's like it's interesting having talked about Daredevil publicly for so long. People care what I think.
Well,
it feels
and
cute.
To that end, come on, give us something.
Oh, I mean, like I said, I was happy with it. I enjoyed it very much. And I feel like the main thing is not comparing it to the comic, in a lot of ways.
I agree with that. So hold on, I'm gonna push you one more time, because it seems like there's a little bit of reserve in your voice.
Oh, just because it isn't a Born Again cat.
Okay, fair enough. I completely agree. I think it's a fantastic example of why we have really now at this point evolved past comparing to the comics. For all, I mean, I think it was always a dangerous thing to do, even when they were really doing pretty parallel comic storylines and adapting pretty obvious comic things. But it's an adaptation. It's not meant to be compared. It's meant to be adapted, and you are meant to be interested in the source material and to maybe go take a look at it, but not to always get into the question of which one is better. What story are they doing exactly? Why did they leave this thing out? I will say one thing I really look for is not how does it compare to the comics, but how does it give me whatever its version of the vibe is that I get from the comics. And the adaptation of the action sequence can be a really good example of that. And it's something that I feel the Defenders shows on Netflix, and this as a sort of follow-up to that, really took up very well. There is an incredible action sequence right at the start of the series that feels not something that like feels shot for shot like a video version of a comic, but like it said to me, this is why you do an adaptation. This is why you take a series of still images that you use your mind to move, and instead put the power into the production crew to actually make that motion happen. That initial action fight sequence really had so much of that same excitement that you get from reading a great action sequence in comics as a viewer.
I love that. I think that's super spectacular. And I feel like that's even part of where we're really entering a point where we sit with these shows and we talk about what it means to be a comic book adaptation, but like I don't think we talk about what it means to be a novel adaptation, what it means to be a movie adaptation, what it means to be I guess we still talk about what it means to be a video game adaptation, because we only really talk about it when we think the art is a lesser form. We only really talk about it because TV is already the toilet of live acting to most critics, right? And that's already the first thing. So then when you add in something like comic book, something like video game, it really is asking a lot of critics who most of the time can't get out of their own biases to have a fully formed opinion, which I'm saying knowing that I started this episode with my biases about Daredevil make me a terrible Daredevil critic, so I cannot be the person to give you an honest opinion of Born Again, because I'm going to come to it with what I come to it with. And so I feel that, we're still talking, I'd even been very amusingly pro this Oscars for a very dumb reason. I really like that 2 of the winners are from Scream 4 and Scream 5 successively. Just makes me laugh really hard. But I really rooted for Honora for several months. I've been on the Honora should win everything train, because I really loved that it was this is one of the least expensive films to ever be nominated for Best Picture ever. I love the lead actress's ability. I don't know enough about her personally, but everything I've ever seen her in, I just think she's marvelous. Got a boy's name, real trendsetter that way. But one of the things that I think is significant about talking about it that way is nobody says shitty little art film anymore. Nobody comes for Clerks. I mean, we come for Clerks because Clerks is terrible. But nobody comes for Clerks when it's nominated for something like that anymore. But we still talk about the comic book TV show and the comic book movie like they have hepatitis.
Yeah, there's, and horror. We're so far behind. The Substance did not get a single award in a primary. I think they got probably special effects maker or something. And again, weirdly, same for Wicked, which musicals do sometimes get them. But as much as it was very important to me that Ariana Grande didn't win, there were a lot of other categories that I felt like I would have been very happy to see Wicked do well, even though it's not my thing in particular. But it's still wild to me that after all these years, horror cannot get any recognition. And one of the things it says to me, because to me, I love comic book films, and I can make a huge justification for why many of them are at an artistic level worthy of an Oscar, and why there are performances in a lot of these. But I get why the biases are so heavy that for a lot of people that's insurmountable. But I can't understand it with horror, and I know if we can't ever beat it with horror, we're never going to get to the point of beating it with comic book movies. But horror really is just such a perfect genre for commentary, for satire, for reflection, for an artistic take on a subject that allows us to experience deep wells of emotion, and allows for huge production thought and value to go into telling a story and making a point and asking a question and exploring a theme, and that never gets recognized. But it's all slasher fix, it's all just jokes, it's all just gross out humor to people. And so the amazing movies mostly don't even get nominated, and then every once in a while they get nominated and they never win anything. And it's really unfortunate. And it, to me, it does not bode well for comic book movies ever getting recognition when they will deserve it.
And there's an exception that proves the rule, unfortunately, which is just the dumbest phrase on the planet, but it actually unfortunately applies here, which is Silence of the Lambs,
right?
Which is a legitimate horror film. But what's interesting is when you steal from other genres, it's always so sexy, because American Beauty, for all of the ways that it is an incredibly time-damaged film for a lot of reasons, although I still think walking through American Beauty is still like walking through the MoMA. It is still for all of the ugliness of.
No, I mean, American Beauty in its silo is a phenomenal film. But even the stuff about it where you'd be like, oh, they'd never do that today. None of it is in it. Like the relationship between Kevin Spacey and Mira Sorvino is intentionally inappropriate. You would still do that stuff. They just did it with Jenna Ortega and what's his name? The British guy, little British Muppet.
The one from Black Panther and The Hobbit and The Office, who played the original Jim. Yeah, I can't think of his name either, but I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. So anyway, we still do. Thank you. We still do that theme. So the only thing is like Kevin Spacey's a bad person, but phenomenal actor. Unfortunately, like I the other day I went and threw on a couple House of Cards. Just because I kind of wanted to remember, like, was it actually that good? I mean, he's really a good actor. Like, it sucks. He's a horrible person, but he's a great actor. And there's a bunch of stuff like that in American Beauty where it's just like, it's still an amazing film. It's just, people are weird.
And so the reason I brought it up was just because if you watch it under the right lens, it kind of watches as a horror movie.
Yeah,
it borrows a lot of elements. And so, like, I feel like things like comic book movies have gotten so far away from getting to be comic book movies, and they wind up being borrowed, and just sort of the idea that we need to homogenize all art and move everything to the middle of center. Like, I love the 64 crayon Crayola box with the sharpener in the back. I do, but I love the 128, right? And but I also love the 12, and I love the 8 with pastels, because like there is something so beautiful and so rich about getting to do something for a specific group of people. I personally have very little faith that Marvel is going to ever man the battle stations, or, woman, non-binary person, the battle stations, whatever makes you happy. I don't care if you're a brony, that's fine too. You can put it in there. I don't give a shit. And I don't think they're ever going to do that on the level of New Avengers ever again. We're never going to have what Wade is trying to generate over at DC with Unlimited. We're never going to have that again, I don't think, because Marvel just simply, by the way, thank you so much, Kevo, for Martin Freeman over in the chat.
Yes.
Wow, both Jims have been in Marvel stuff. John Krasinski has been the other Mr. Fantastic. And
the third Jim, Randall Park.
Oh,
and no Pams.
Although weirdly, Pam was married to James Gunn.
Yes, which we covered in HTML. So go check that out.
I feel like what winds up happening is there's this sort of current of these characters are being kind of borrowed. They're being used in interesting ways. I think the films aren't really getting to be unique products for genre audiences, and I don't think that Marvel is going to ever really helm a big book big enough again. New Avengers was just so big that even though I would never give any issue more than a B-, ultimately the series lives in A- infamy in my brain. I just don't think Marvel has the bigness to do something that big ever again, because they're so afraid of doing something so small ever again, that even when something starts running great guns in the campaign, by the end it's still Steve Orlando, Jed Bartlett, the Democrat, where I wanted someone to run great guns like they did in the campaign, but by issue 23 I've got you. And I love Steve Orlando, and I love Steve Orlando's work, and I love that he's out here representing hypermasculine queer people, because evidently we need more of a mouthpiece. But I also find myself frustrated that I was promised a book that would make Silver Ravenwolf say that's too out there, and instead I've gotten a book that I feel like occasionally matches the description of Wicca on Charmed.
And I love that you compared it to one of our favorite shows of all time, The West Wing, where, one of the big themes of the first season and one of the really big engines that gets the show moving is this idea that they are in fact stuck in traction. And, Jed Bartlett is playing everything safe. He's not doing anything bad, but he's not doing anything at all, really. He's not doing anything great. And he, keeps not taking fights that they could lose. And Marvel keeps not taking fights that they could lose. They keep not making books that could not be good, or that could be bad. And so instead they make books that are never really particularly good because there's no risk. You know, they made no attempt to do anything that might rock the boat. So, you know, you get great authors who are, you know, writing great stuff, and you get great artists who are drawing really well, but there's no risk taking. And there's no sense of like, this might rub somebody the wrong way. It'll never rub anybody the wrong way, and therefore won't do anything. And yeah, I really see, you know, I hope that Marvel is never going to do this unless there's huge shakeups, unless Akira Yoshida is no longer the editor-in-chief, unless, you know, a lot of these boys club guys that stay there forever retire. But man, do I hope all those things happen. Man, would I love to see a new editor-in-chief. Man, would I love to see more women, more trans people, more non-binary people, more people of color, in those mouthpiece roles and in those visible roles where you see them at the con table, you know, at the panels, at the cons, announcing what the new stuff is. You see them giving the interviews. You see their Substacks being quoted with absolute nonsense ideas about how old Cyclops is. You know, I think, yeah, it's never going to change the way it is now, but my hope is at some point we get some kind of shakeup in which it could change.
That is specifically how I feel about Derek Landy over on Doctor Strange of Asgard. I think it's my book of the month right now. Not because the issue was great, because the issue was kind of paint by the numbers and like a pretty cool color forms kind of, because, you know, paint by the numbers gets a really bad rap because my art is ugly, and paint by the numbers makes it a little bit more attractive. I'm still going to do the wrong colors, but at least I'll know where to put the wrong colors consistently. And
it's not let me unleash your inner creativity by telling you what to do. It is paint by numbers, and the idea is this is one activity. Like, you might try this and you might do a bunch of them, and you might, like, through repetition realize what your own style is or how you would emulate this, and you no longer need the numbers. You can kind of recall what you've done multiple times. Anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, but no, excellent. And the thing I would say is, like, the next step is color forms, where you place color forms down on a specific subject, but color forms ask us to set the stage in a sort of concept art, film art kind of way, where they're sketching it out and you have a vague idea, but obviously everything would move and change a little bit. I feel like what I read with Doctor Strange of Asgard was the world's most beautiful, taking Doctor Strange color forms from the Doctor Strange set and moving them over to an Asgard set, but literally using the spell from the book that replaced the magic inside Doctor Strange with Asgard magic. I loved this. This was delicate and kind of benevolent of spirit in a way, where it was willing to make aspersions of Loki, but then it also was willing to immediately understand the backtrack on them. The art was an 11.6. This was a really great first issue for so many people that I went back and read more Immortal Thor. I was just really impressed. The issue itself is probably a B, but my love, my dedication is an A for this.
Very interesting. I had the same reaction. It was about a B. But I didn't fall in love. I didn't have the dedication quite off that. I still really like the pitch. And I'm excited to see where it goes. And I like the pitch, like I like the elevator pitch, but then I like Doctor Strange's pitch too. Like, and they're kind of the same thing. Like, it's in a way that I found put a smile on my face. Just essentially the same way that somebody would go into an editor's office and go, well, he's not Sorcerer Supreme anymore, so what can he do? He could go to Asgard. They've got magical issues there. They need somebody. They don't have a Sorcerer Supreme. And in the book, he just shows up at Asgard and goes to Thor and is like, I don't have a job. I thought I'd hang out here. And I think that's a great, I love that pitch. Again, I love that pitch. I think that's really fantastic. And I think there were other pieces of it, like the fact that he says specifically, no, I thank you for inviting me. Like, thank you for letting me be here, but I'm not going to live with you. I should go make my own way. And so he immediately leaves Thor's palace and goes to like literally rent an apartment. And he's like, I've got to go figure out where to live. I got to go figure out what to do. Which just made it all feel a lot more. One, it sets you up for that like very basic conflict. So rather than doing what often happens in a lot of Marvel books, which is taking you to a conflict that is at an 11 or that is like really steeped in ridiculous mythos, like for instance, you know, the recently revealed daughter of a character that was born out of a space egg who is running an empire, who has to be saved, you know, just something so complex that the average comic reader is not necessarily going to know about, becomes your immediate conflict, and you're just kind of thrown in the middle of something. That, by the way, for anybody who's not reading a lot of X-Men right now, is a reference to what we will be covering for X-Manhunt in just a moment. You know, picking right into a conflict like that, I don't always think puts the reader on the best footing, even if you kind of want to hit the ground running with your conflict and want to generate a lot of plot and action and story movement. I think you might generate a lot of story movement, but it's not necessarily moving forward. It might be a lot of flailing. And so doing something as simple as saying, okay, I'm going to move here and now I got to rent an apartment. Now I got to go to the local pub and just try and meet people. By the end of this issue, we have now gotten into a pretty complicated plot that is a little bit confusing. But the way we get there and the steps that we take to get there are so simple and so straightforward that it makes it very easy to follow and enjoyable to kind of sit with the issue and have you know, sort of the feeling of a tabletop RPG adventure. You go to the pub, you talk to a stranger, that person says, oh, you got to meet this guy. Somebody knocks on your door, they say, hey, someone's asking for you. All really simple plots. They get us from A to B really quickly. And it did make the issue really solid to me. Didn't blow me out of the water, but made it a good read, a solid read. A lot of dialogue. Oh boy, lots to read on them pages. Maybe could have cut 15 to 30% of it and left a little more room for the gorgeous art.
Yeah, I really get that. And I normally ding things like the Blade thing where, oh no, it's this thing from this absurd Blade comic from whenever. This issue I thought kind of did it pretty well. It was just a quick reference, just kind of moved on. Yeah, there was a Bendisian amount of dialogue.
There was a little reference to an obscure Doctor Strange issue, but it was kind of just like a cute Easter egg. Like I love always referencing the Blood Hunt thing because it is the entire reason Blood Hunt is happening. It is the central crux of this entire enormous crossover that they're saying could end the universe, and it's all down to, again, an issue that you can't find from 1995. This was just somebody being like, hey, remember that time you did that thing? And he goes, oh yeah, I definitely remember. I apologize for that. Cute and funny if you got to participate. Really cool for you. If you didn't, they just explained it to you. You are now in on the joke, and the issue moves on. I love when comics do that. That's a blast.
Yeah, this reminded me a lot of the Aaron Bachalo years. It's just kind of coming in, new idea, daring visual art. I really liked it.
I will say, I thought of them. It had that vibe. I also thought of them because that era, they really were making an attempt to de-age Doctor Strange. Not in any kind of like a spell made him 26, but they were kind of drawing him that way. Like, you know, his clothing, like his cape was transformed into like hipster clothing basically when he was on the street, and the whole thing had skewed a little bit younger. And what was funny to me was this did the exact opposite, and I felt like was aging him up a bit and making him kind of, you know, a wise old man who is now sort of more on the level of a thousands of year old Asgardian, rather than, who knows, he could be 35, he could be 26, he could be 45. So not a bad thing at all, just an interesting choice and something that's going to happen with one of the really long-lived characters, as opposed to my complaint with somebody like a Noel from NYX, who, during Krakoa was often drawn as a 13-year-old. In this, is taking some steroids that I would like to know a thing or two about, because he is just huge and gorgeous and definitely 27. So that's confusing.
Yeah, to transition then over to X-Manhunt, I can't believe we're already looking at our second X-Men crossover in the last 3 months. It does feel a little too fast-paced, and then it felt like too many things happened in Uncanny between them for them not to just be speed bumps. X-Manhunt, first of all, has a terrible name, and because it just, there's no other way to put it. It really sounds like X-Man cunt, and it's all I can think. It is distracting and frustrating, and the problem is straight up these writers know what I'm saying. These writers all watch Pit Stop, and they all get the jokes that I'm making, and they know what I'm saying. So I don't like this being X-Manhunt, because there's also no Manhunt. There was not one fucking fraction of connection issue to issue. This is an experiment in what we wanted going poorly, teaching us that what we want can sometimes go poorly.
Yeah, just confusing all over, because the setup outside of the books, the thing that they're really telling you is essentially like, it's not the hunt for Charles Xavier, it's that Charles Xavier is on the hunt for the most dangerous mutant, which is not him. He's really dangerous and they want him in jail, but there's somebody else that's much more dangerous, and that's who we're after. That's been alluded to the whole time. Like, yeah, Charles is in the prison, but Charles isn't prisoner X. There's somebody else behind that door, and that's the really scary person. There's a bunch of, like, you think that this is all about Xavier, and it's really not. He's just a bad guy. He's one of the ones they don't like. And then the immediate setup is Charles breaks out of prison. So, okay, is it Charles Manhunt? Because Charles is breaking out of prison not to go find anybody else or do anything else, but save his daughter in space. Which now we're into a thing where it's like, I actually could very easily be convinced to care about that, and that is absolutely I don't care if Xavier's in jail ever anyway, so we already have a problem there, because I think that's a nonsense storyline, because he's in and out all the time. He is the most dangerous person in the world. Yeah, he could kill everyone with a thought. If we're doing that, we've done it before, and I can't keep doing that story. You either have a definitive answer where, again, I think it's either, somebody kills him and says, I just couldn't live with this person existing anymore, and then you deal with the fallout of that, or you stop doing these storylines. It's not interesting. And it plays out as not interesting throughout this series of books, because we get back to Charles, I did it. I knew that everybody would hate me, but I had to do it because they need somebody to hate. Well, no, that's your boyfriend, Magneto. You throw Magneto at people all the time as the mutant that everybody's allowed to hate. Don't act like it's you. You just do the things that you think are best and right, and maybe you're correct, but that's a different thing. You're not self-sacrificing. You just think you know better. And writers also, you can't have it both ways. He can't be self-sacrificing and also always think he knows better. And you also can't have his boyfriend be the one that everybody hates, who is literally on posters about that and is literally compared to the greatest villains of all time. So that's nonsense. We are back again to Scott hating the professor, which had its peak during Avengers versus X-Men, where Scott killed the professor. Scott took over running the school, has consistently said he does it better than Professor Xavier does, has consistently admonished Professor Xavier for the million terrible things he's done. So I don't need to rehash that storyline either. I don't know what we're doing here. I don't know who the Manhunt is. Manhunting has nothing to do with trying to save Xandra. Trying to save Xandra has nothing to do with Storm being Eternal Storm. That has nothing to do with the... Well, I mean, so there are these little things where it's like, it's connected, but it's so loose and uninteresting. So, in NYX, he's looking for a Krakoa seed, but no, he's not actually looking for the Krakoa seed. He's looking for one more cradle that he has that is near the Krakoa seed. And so the Krakoa seed is actually just an NYX plot now that has nothing to do with X-Manhunt. So every book that he's in, it's just Charles showing up into the book, mugging at the camera, and then, 2 pages of intersecting dialogue that justify why we're doing this. And then we're on to the next book where we repeat this process over again. So we will be doing this now 7 more times. Okay. 5, 4.
There's 7 total issues.
7 total. Okay, yes. So we've had 3. So yeah, so we're doing this 4 more times. Okay, if that's what you're choosing to do with your crossover event, that's fine. Thank you for not making it 50 issues that I have to buy ancillary ones and, X-Manhunt, Laura Kinney, the Wolverine Bloodlust. But I don't know. I can't be convinced to care about this right now.
And I feel like the other thing that makes it really easier for me is that it is running 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We will be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, these are actually, as nasty as I'm being and as kind of cynical as I'm being, these are actually points in its favor. If you're going to make us do crossover events, sure, make them 7 issues, make them, release the issues, multiple issues a week, get it done in 3 weeks, and then we can move on from this. I don't think this is great, but I don't think it's interminable, and I'm not furious. I'm not reading 3 great issues of a Strange Academy book and thinking, well, why isn't this being highlighted? And then I've got to go through a Venom side story, a Wolverine side story, a Spider-Man side story, and they're all terrible. And I'm just hoping to get a kernel of a plot that is important to the actual event, which is just a 5-book mini-series that is the main event book, which is actually the only thing you really need to read. But that takes 6 to 8 weeks to come out because they stagger them the way that they do. And so it just goes on and on and on. This is not that. This is at least for as sort of like, I don't really care that much. Everything's one and done. We'll be out of this quickly. And I think I can't expect, if we're almost halfway through it now and I'm not like, yeah, really solid, that they're going to absolutely pull it through in these next 4 issues. But I also don't think they're just going to faceplant.
And I think it's even one of the reasons that previous events that to me suck. I don't think they're good. I don't know. I feel like sometimes when you say an event is bad, you are immediately being cruel to someone. And I don't know. I've had editors be pretty unkind about my work, and I'm not trying to be like, well, everybody gets it, but the first thing every editor says to me is, if you don't like hearing criticism, this is not the industry for you. And then the first people to get really salty about criticism are the people that create the work. So it's just sort of like, everybody take a big breath. But Messiah Complex and Second Coming are not great stories, and they are riddled with giant plot holes, and they are riddled with over storytelling, because overtelling is something that exists as well. And so many of these eras that are events are eras, and they are omnibus editions, and they are not a single trade. And when you are running a book for 7 months, and it is X-Manhunt for 7 months, and it runs through 1 issue a month for 7 months, and all of the weeks in between people are doing reaction books, it just winds up being exhausting. If this winds up being a speed bump in my year of X-Men storytelling, it's fine, because it was a 3-week speed bump. It's not the best issue of anything. I love Sarah Gaunt. My favorite issue of the 3 was Uncanny. I did not enjoy NYX very much, unfortunately. I just don't think I enjoy this NYX. Period. I think it's fun and interesting, but it is someone else's take on people you love. It feels like everybody's mind controlled. It's not for me.
Yes. Yeah. NYX or Uncanny was really not my favorite for a very specific reason. And again, I hate doing this because it's the whole thing you were just talking about. I don't like giving this kind of criticism. Nobody is not working hard. Nobody is not doing their best. And all these people are more talented than I am at the craft that they they trade. So this didn't work for me. Javier Garron's art on Uncanny, complete mismatch for the book, the tone of the book. It starts really early on. Deathbird shows up in a single page panel, and she looks like a Ren and Stimpy character. Like the face she's making is just almost silly. It's supposed to be very like furious, angry, desperate. She's ready to fight, but she looks like a cartoon character. And it just doesn't fit the tone at all. And then we finally get to the X-Men and the Outliers, and I mean, like, from a very horny perspective, Wolverine looks fantastic. But also, this just a body size and proportion that is not his. It's the silliest thing I've ever seen. He's 6'2", both directions, and you know, he looks enormous in a way that I find very fun, but also really comical, and it took me immediately out of the issue. And there's just a lot with Garron's art that I like the style. I would love to see it in an Ecstatics. Garron would do an incredible Ecstatics, but it's not working for me in this book. And so it really took me out of it. And then, you know, the ultimately the problem that I just kind of don't care. And it also was very confusing. There's a lot of people having visions and hallucinating, and so I don't know, just kind of took me out of it. NYX, I'm having the same thing. I the way that you put it, it feels like all your favorite characters are being mind controlled. Jackson Lanzig and Colin Kelly just have this really specific way that they think people behave, and that they think people speak, and that they think that they believe the characters would the actions they think the characters would take. And it feels like it doesn't have any common ground with any of the other people that have written those characters in the last decade. So they do kind of feel mind controlled. Like, it does just kind of feel like everything is coming out of nowhere. And like, there's I'm stoked that Kaiden is back. There's like, again, there's like pitch ideas. Like, if I told you some of this, or somebody told me some of this stuff, like they have like kind of a clubhouse hang, it's like a roundhouse type vibe, I'd be like, oh, that sounds really fun. But then when I read it, I'm not compelled. Storm, I think of the three, is probably my favorite, but I also really feel confused, and I don't. This feels a lot more like I have no idea what's actually happening, and I'm not accusing anybody of this or saying this is what is actually going on, but it feels like Murewa Ayodele got notes from Jonathan Hickman re Gods and Al Ewing re Al Ewing's view of Storm and her place in the Marvel cosmology, and was basically told, write those into this book, because this really, I mean, this whole thing has shades of what was going on in Gods, which never got properly resolved. I think it's really difficult to bring the abstract entities into any Marvel book if you don't have a plan for recodifying how the Marvel cosmology works. And then the person that was doing that besides John Hickman was Al Ewing. It was Al Ewing and Ram V in a bunch of different books, including like Defenders, including like Resurrection of Magneto and the other books that he had Storm in at the end of Krakoa. And here it just feels like they're not even bad plots. They're not even bad ideas for Storm. Storm is a goddess. She is one of the most excellent characters. So the idea that an abstract entity would see her as an avatar, totally. That has to mean something more than, oh, remember that time in the From the Ashes era? And it doesn't feel like it's going to. So when I read it on the page, knowing how Marvel is lately, I just sort of it's a lot of eyebrow raising, but I did love it. Lucas Vernick art is just absolutely beautiful. Sometimes have questions about bodies and over sexualization, but those are questions, they're not accusations. But overall, like, that of the three X-Manhunt books, that was the one that I was most here for. Again, all of them, it just kind of feels like each writer was told, hey, just so you know, whatever you're writing right now, Charles Xavier will be showing up for somewhere between 10 to 16 pages, and you need to be prepared for how you're going to do that.
It's where the speed of the release schedule is great, but perhaps the speed of the design was not the best situation. One of the things that I guess I took for granted is how long these crossovers set, ramping up the pieces that are going to come together to tell the crossover, because so far the only thing that all of the crossover elements have in common is Xavier. And then there's even stuff where like the incongruity is a little too tough for me, like the way Cyclops was filled with lightning bolts was so graphic and cool, but are you actually telling me he was literally filled with lightning bolts in a literal way? Because they were like, what is his status? Like, was he actually that fried out from the inside that we should be worried he's dead?
Well, he also gets covered in ice at one point that ID has to melt, which that would fucking kill you. Like, these are, it's not magic ice. It's not like I put the magic ice spell on you that will freeze you, but you're physically fine. There was a bunch of that. It
was very odd. So far, this is not my favorite crossover, but it's certainly not a problem.
I'm stoked to see Xandro. Xandro is one of my favorite absolute nonsense ideas that shouldn't exist. I love any child of Charles Xavier. What I'm really bummed about is it appears like Legion is coming back as a villain in Phoenix. I don't like Legion as a villain, but again, I really like Children of Charles Xavier, so that's always funny to me. But yeah, I don't care what happens with this.
Yeah. So I guess that brings us over to DC. I feel like our DC number ones this week were a little bit weird and a little bit random. I really wasn't sure what to do. There weren't a lot
I gotta tell you, I think you picked two great ones. Again, this is another thing where I was like, oh, little new DC boy, I got to have fun.
I felt like, there were not a lot of issues labeled good jumping on point. There were not a lot of number ones. There were not a lot of like, oh, what a key moment into this book. Yeah. So I went with the two number ones that weren't reprints, because there was a reprint of Joker number 1. And there was a reprint of an issue of Hush. Yeah. And I think this experiment showed that a lot can happen in a book where nothing matters, and nothing can really happen in a book where a lot matters. And they can both be pretty entertaining.
Brilliant way to put it. I think that's really true. As soon as we got on board this DC project, we basically started right as they were coming into Absolute Power. And Absolute Power hangs on Amanda Waller's control of Dreamer, who is, just because of like silly personal connections that I have to Nicole Maines, a person who is from Maine, who graduated from the same high school that I did, who's just somebody who, as a queer person in a sometimes very conservative state, I've just been able to be very proud of. That's again, sometimes that's all you need in comics. Like, if you can find somebody like that who you're like, I have some passion for this person that played this character on Legends of Tomorrow, and then as a result of that, went on to do kind of a Mondolani style, a lot of writing for the character. But like, that's all I have. I don't have any, like, Dreamer wasn't a character that was formative to me as a child. It wasn't, I didn't even read that much Dreamer before this. But like, with that bit of a connection to a character, you can get into all sorts of comics that way. And I always encourage people to kind of find that stuff. So that was a really early one for me. And it's one that I've carried all the way through here. And that's a character that, like, now I have read a lot of, I still think is really cool. I actually really do love her power set and just think she's a cool, hot character. I really like her friendship with John Kent and his sassy boyfriend. And that all was on full display here. So this was like this is a bit of a full circle moment, because this is the first big revisit of that character and those characters and those relationships since Absolute Power ended. And that's kind of all happened. That kind of all started happening as we were starting up doing DC coverage on this podcast. So for me, in that way, it was really, really fun. I do absolutely agree with what you're saying. It's kind of, this is a very important story in the ongoing telling of the DC universe, because this is a lot of tying up the the loose ends out of Absolute Power that we're never going to get covered in like Justice League Unlimited, which really just needs to move on and be the Justice League being superheroes. But of course you're going to have questions about like, well, what happened to Amanda Waller? What happened to this whole system that got set up? And this is a book that was doing some of that work, and yet in issue 1 didn't really actually do a lot of that work. It definitely mentioned that it was going to do that work. It definitely, you know, if it continues 6 issues, 10 issues, could do a lot of that work, and I'll be super excited to read and see what happens. But it was a lot of talk, a lot of movement sort of back and forth across one little area, and you know, just like not the most consequential first issue of all time.
I also feel like we're in a sticky situation where too frequently I feel like there's not a lot in the issue that wasn't in the solicit, and this was just another full solicit comic. Love Catman, Catman do. I really enjoy John. I feel like Jay is frequently written like a Patricia Heaton-esque kind of sitcom nag. And
yes,
I don't know what to do with that.
Yes. That is such a fucking great example. And it wasn't fun here. It's not that it needs to be fun, but it also wasn't interesting. He has every right to be wary of Dreamer, and there's always something to be said for that thing of like, well, you know, even if they were threatening your family, you should have let them kill your family, because doing a bad thing to save people you care about is still bad. Like, that's not a bad that's not an uncompelling storyline to address, but as a writer, it's your job to you know, make sure it doesn't come off as naggy, and especially because this is not real life. You know, arguments in real life tend to happen this way. Arguments in real life, we do tend to kind of nip at each other and nag at each other. And the reason you make art is because it's going to be different. And, you know, the reason you make entertaining art is because you want it to be different. And so you don't want to do a non-improv thing. And this was a case in which, you know, John's going, I'm wary too. Dreamer's going, I'm sorry. And John is just going, no, I'm mad. Okay, scene over. Like, if you're not going to say anything but no, then we can't improv, then we can't have dialogue. And you can write yourself into that corner when you are the single writer who gets to decide what all the characters say, and you don't necessarily realize it because you think you're writing a character that just has a strong point of view and has a stance and won't be moved. And sure, you can maybe get away with that for a second, but eventually they can't just keep saying no, because literally no matter what, you can't write yourself out of that. Or you can try and it will probably not be great writing. That character eventually has to say, okay, but what about, or something else. And they also become unlikable when they're doing that. So it's kind of a double-sided problem with him, where, you know, he's not really actually having a dialogue. So we're just constantly establishing that he doesn't trust Dreamer. And then he comes off as a sitcom wife nag, and it's not super fun, especially because he doesn't get to do cool stuff like use his powers a lot and like show that, you know, he doesn't get to have like a fuck you, I'm powerful moment that at least sort of balances this all out.
Yeah, it's where, you know, you never want to say clingy superhero romantic partner, but you wind up with clingy superhero romantic partner. But, you know, clingy superhero romantic partner has been men just as long as it's been women, as long as we've had female superheroes. So
yeah, that's why we have that Gray Lantern.
Yeah, and so I feel a lot like the big problem here is just that this is like if more books would just start with an annual or a trade or like a triple length special edition, we could get past a lot of the icky start vibes.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I'm still totally interested to see where this one goes. This seems like a cool team. When you have a team book like this where it's, you know, Secret Six and they actually could be something, I get really wary of that sitcom nag energy from one of the characters, and when it's a mix of like heroes and villains and characters that don't like each other, because then it always seems like we're just running towards the end where they all go, obviously we would never actually be a team, but wasn't it crazy that time that we all saved the world? And I much prefer in a book like this where it's like, oh, holy shit, we're a team. Like this could be a thing from now on. And I like this group of people. Like I would like to see this be a team again, but I do feel like from issue 1, I'm just waiting for them to go, wow, that was really crazy. Let's never do this again.
Yeah. And it's, really funny because I think that while I really would not have picked these two books together if I'd had like kind of any other choice, there is a really good balance to Teen Titans Go, where and I mean, obviously I don't pick the books, TK and I collaborate on this, but I oftentimes do get a little bit more gung-ho about picking the DC titles because I know a few more of them. But Teen Titans Go #1 was 3 things I generally don't want, which are animated series tie-ins, hyper meta books, and books that exist solely to make sure that that thing continues being published. I don't ever like any of those 3 choices, and I really liked this. I thought both DC books were B's, no real dings. For what this was, this had all the energy of the X Babies, but Teen Titans.
Yeah, I see that. I think I wish it had a little more of like the setup of X Babies. Like I maybe would have loved to have seen them be a little more part of the larger DC universe, just for, because it was so self-referential, and the humor was ever so slightly more mature than I was expecting. Still totally a kid's book, still completely fine for a kid to read, still great for an intended audience member of Teen Titans Go, but just mature enough that I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny to see them actually be talking to Batman, an adult Bruce Wayne here. I tend to agree with you in terms of like those are 3 things that I don't like, and particularly I'm always very wary of the meta writing. I was really pleased here by the their switch to 3 different styles of comics that this book could be. One of them being kind of a classic, one of them being a noir, and one of them being like an indie hipster book. And the way the art style shifted for that and the tone shifted for that in a way that was, again, very, very meta commentary, but also just like actually really well done. And just a really kind of great reminder that these properties will phase through genres as they like. And sometimes that's really great, and sometimes it's really stupid. But Teen Titans Go is just another one of those genres. And those characters are all in the book Titans right now, which we are sometimes covering as adults in a more, house style of 2025. So they really will appear where they're going to appear, in whatever kind of style and genre people want to publish them in. And I thought, it was a nice sort of nod to the fact that that's all part of this business and this industry.
And I even think that's the lifeblood of why people are so upset about Teen Titans Go in general. I like Teen Titans. I like Teen Titans Go. I just don't care. I think Teen Titans Go outlasted Teen Titans by like 4 seasons 8 years ago. I mean, I'm exaggerating the numbers, but this is not something where I really have a stake in the game. It's just animated shows that came after my time.
Yeah.
I'm just here to support the fact that these characters keep being made and published and produced.
Yeah.
And I think you said it all really well. One of the only things I wish that this book could have done a little more was it could have given me the idea that what's next is the next issue. I know that this is obviously a one and done. There's different creators each book, but I really might have thought this was a special one shot.
Oh, I did think it was a special one shot until I did a little more research. Yeah, 100%. And same thing, like I was not a Teen Titans person, and even more so, I was not a Teen Titans Go person. and not everything needs to be for me, but also, you know, comics are so niche anyway that when you get nicher into like it's just for ages, like we're really only publishing this for ages blank to blank, or like in this case it's probably a mix of the thing is, if they're kids who didn't have Teen Titans Go already, they're probably not going to pick this up. So it's really just for those people who were kids who are now kind of adults, who are in that certain age range where they got this show. That's such a small niche, and that's why I'm like, maybe this could have been like their X babies, where these characters get to interact with even an Elseworld, but like some other version of the larger DC universe, such that this did have larger appeal to, doesn't need to be to the full DC audience, but this felt really specific for a medium that is already really specific. So it's just like, I can't picture this book selling very well. And then that immediately becomes the discussion of like, okay, well, so they're probably not going to make another one, because it's not going to, like, they're probably not going to do this concept again. They'll print whichever ones they have, but they're probably not going to follow up on this concept, because how could this possibly do well?
And, you know, the upcoming issues all have very different vibes, very different looks, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I think one of the things that's cool is animation on a show takes months, into years on a movie, and getting to appreciate extrapolations of that animation in comic form is a shorthand way to pay tribute to something that's a lot of fun, high energy, and generally exciting to engage with. And that's what's really fun for me. That's why I don't really care about oh no, it was Teen Titans Go or Teen Titans. I'm here to have fun with an animated series. I'm not here to get really specifically anal.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, so you know, I kind of give everything across the board. Even when I do give an A, I made cases for why it gets a B. It was just sort of a B week on comics. No real like attack on anybody, not coming for anybody. Don't think anybody should be fired. Just a B week, and that's okay. It's fun. Had a nice time. Gonna keep reading comics next week, so we're doing fine.
Yeah.
Overall, I think next week is 2 parts of X-Manhunt. I will appreciate being 2 issues deeper into X-Men. It's terrible. I will appreciate being at 5 out of 7. If for no other reason, it just puts us closer to the end.
Yeah, and then we can know where we are and see where we go from here. I completely agree with that. Yeah, and like you said, nothing's gonna stop us from reading them. We're gonna keep up with this. But yeah, I think I feel generally the same way. Basically, B's across the board. I did think our 2 more serious number ones, that being Doctor Strange and Secret Six, were both really solid, like moving more in the B+ range even. But you know, I think overall, I could see how both could have really been home runs. And not that they weren't great, but there's still so much potential there. And in both cases, I will say that the upside of that is that I'm really excited to read the next issue, and I'm really excited to get to the 5th and 6th issues and like see if these series really can make do on some of the promises that I think they do show immediately. And so yeah, I'm excited to keep going.
And you know, at some point we will probably talk about Daredevil a little bit more in depth.
Yeah.
And we'll keep on running these books and keep on having a good time. But we would not be able to run this thing without our trusty, faithful producer, Kevo.
The glorious Kevo.
My wonderful husband. Hey, handsome. I know You'll be with us for our Sunday broadcast covering Drag Race, doing more of our amazing draft. Super excited about that with you. And thanks for running the show. And until then, where can everybody find you? Oh, and what did you think of Daredevil?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. You guys had a lot of really great points. You know, I think the only thing I would add is one of the things I turned to Nico and said was it really felt, and you had it in the action, but in terms of the visuals themselves, the art, the way that the colors were displayed, even the visual imagery was so comic book. Yeah. I really saw what you were referring to in terms of the choreography. You know, I felt like the first episode in so many ways gave us everything we were expecting. It did exactly what we were expecting with the returning characters right away. It gave us a hallway scene, all of these great things. And now it's got room to grow, and I am very interested to see where it is going to grow. I'll be very interested to talk about it. We have a lot of really exciting stuff we're going to want to talk about this year, and you can find me on the socials at Kevo Really. That's KevoReally.
Well, really, Kevo, you're the best, and we love you. And thank you so much for running this show, producing this show, and being you. But, TK, I've already asked you what you think of Daredevil, so I'm going to change it up. And what is your big hope for X-Manhunt? Where do you hope it goes? What's the driving force for you? And where can everybody find you online?
My big hope is that it does draw a line in the sand between whatever is coming next and this era, and it does bring us closer to something that feels a little more cohesive, a little less every writer trying to have their own version of what ultimately winds up feeling a lot like the same thing. I'm hoping for big changes, and honestly, something that would make me so happy is just more Xandra on Earth, more Xandra, period. I just think she's great. I know she's really stupid. I know it's a stupid character concept. I don't care. I like her a lot. I think her mom's cool. I hate her dad, but I think he's cool too. And I think characters with shitty dads should get to be in comics and say their dads are shitty. Put me in a comic. You can find me at TK Accidental talking about this and so many more things. Mr. Nico Action, I guess I got to reflect the same question on you. What are you hoping to get out of X-Manhunt or after X-Manhunt? Are there any of the other titles that we haven't talked about lately, especially things like Phoenix, that you're particularly excited to talk about again in the future? Where can everybody find you and all that?
For X-Manhunt, I'm just really hoping that we get something that ends with clear repercussions. Clear, this is why we did this. There just keeps being a lot of let's move ourselves forward with a group of issues, and I understand that if you put a lot of things together, it makes it seem more significant, but that doesn't, this so far the connective thread is barely more than the Gods backup pages the month they did that in 2023. So I just don't feel like this, and so I guess I'm excited to talk about Phoenix, if only because I want to know how that's going to tie into Giant Size Dark Phoenix, which Marvel Contest of Champions, that Dark Phoenix event, really fun. It's a little frustrating that Reworked Cyclops is behind a paywall, but it's $25 for 83 days. It's, I hate to say that it's, cents a day, but it's why I quit DC Heroes and Villains, because that game was just tantamount to being robbed.
But man, are we not excited for the new DC fighting game? Yeah,
that'll be really cool. Really excited to see that. And the Marvel game that we played, Mystic
Mayhem. Yeah.
We're excited to see that come back around.
Yeah, I haven't heard an update in a while. I'll be curious to see.
There's a lot of really good stuff on the horizon. Really excited to be here to cover it with all of you, and of course Kevo and TK. As for me, you guys can check me out at Nico Action, NICOACTION. And if you want to check out the awesome music running in the background, and I do say it's awesome because I wrote it, you can check it out at Nico Action Music, NICOACTION MUSIC. You can also check out all of the feeds of this show at HTML. X is for show and X is for podcast. That's Husbands Talking, more or less. And the others are spelt like they sound. Sounds good to me. 3 things you guys can do for us, though, for real. You mean so much to it. Just wanted to gesture. You guys mean so much to us. We think so much of you. We love every one of you who hangs out in the comments, like Andrew, who is always here propping the show up, and the fans that check us out after the fact, the fans that listen through podcast. We love to hear from you. Definitely give us feedback, but what we would love to do also is connect with you through comment, like, and subscribe. Definitely do those things, that subscribe-y guy, so we can find you. You can find us. It's not quite as scary as it sounds. But then 3 things you guys can do for yourselves. Number 1, please stay safe. It's a crazy world out there. Number 2, please be brave, because we love what you've got inside your hearts. And number 3, Remember to evolve daily. Who you were yesterday, incredible. Who you are today, amazing. And who you are tomorrow is going to be the best yet. So we can't wait to be there with you then. So until we are bottomed out in X-Manhunt, we'll see you.